I will introduce Professor Nesbitt now. So Dr. Nesbitt has a strong background in decision analysis, risk, and uncertainty. He teaches decision analysis and ethical analysis here at Stanford. He is a noted expert on national and international energy and decision-making under uncertainty. In fact, he has been in the oil, gas, power, and renewable decision analysis and modeling business continuously since the 1970s and is well known as a leading energy economist and decision analyst across all the various energy forms globally. His companies have done seminal work in infrastructure management, telecommunication, and airline pricing. In fact, inventing the original airline seat pricing software. I think he'll mention a little bit about that today, which will be exciting. He has a startup company in the water remediation and desalination business. The companies he has founded or co-founded, including Decision Focus, Altos, MarketPoint, Arrowhead, and Reticle, have been successful in the energy and water space. So today he'll be talking about practical ethics, and as I think we'll see, what's unique about his approach is the way he combines his breadth of real-world experience with a strong understanding of ethical fundamentals and a focus on decision and action. As we know, ethics can get bogged down in abstraction or rationalization, but for Professor Nesbitt, it's not just about thinking ethics, but living ethics. His course for the ethical analyst teaches the ethical fundamentals and asks students to apply them by writing a personal ethical code of behavior. As he's said again and again to us, the best way to get people to learn and apply solid ethical principles is to get them to write their own personal ethical code. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Nesbitt.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be with all of you. One of the things that we know is that ethical decision-making is all around us, isn't it? We see it every day. And what we'll try to do in the half hour of this webinar is give some examples of some analysis of these situations and what we might do about it. This is one that affected me personally. Secondhand cigarette smoke. This was several years ago. And I was giving a decision analysis course to industry, helping people think about, it's advancing on the timer, thinking about this. And during one of the breaks, a senior executive from one of the tobacco companies took me aside and said, "You have a Stanford PhD?" "Yes, I do." And here comes the request from this person. "We need someone with your credentials to testify in our behalf. You certainly believe that secondhand cigarette smoke is not harmful, don't you? It's very diverse. It's very diluted and transient. We have a lot of money we can pay to you for testimony like this. Will you please do it for us? We'll make it well worth your while. Decision analysis with some low probabilities will be really convincing and convince people that secondhand cigarette smoke is not a liability we should be held accountable for." It's not about thoughts, mindsets, abstractions, or philosophies. Ethics is about actions and consequences. Without decisions, what does ethics even mean? Number two, ethics is about people, not about things. Do cigarettes make decisions? Do cigarettes have any ethical content whatsoever? We think not. We think that things are not what are engaging in actions or behaviors. It's people. The third thing is ethics is ultimately personal, related to personal decision-making or personal contribution to group decision-making. Again, without decisions, what is ethics? Okay, ethics needs to be driven, therefore, by a well-crafted ethical code, we think. In the course that we teach, everyone writes a personal ethical code of action based on the solid ethical principles and theories that we put forth. And that code is a key deliverable in the course. And it's proven to be one of the most significant, penetrating, emotional things people can do. People have told us that years later. Many people carry and modify their ethical codes for many years into the future. That's an interesting comment that we get back from students years into the future. As we think about ethics, we like to think about the decisions related to everyday life and business life as falling into three basic categories, or having three aspects. One is prudential, and the prudential aspect of decision making is what we teach in decision analysis. What's the best thing I can be doing? What benefits me the most? Prudence, making good decisions and maximizing the probability of good outcomes. What do I gain and what do I lose? So we like to look at these ethical decisions, such as the testimony on cigarette smoke, from a prudential point of view. One of the things when we do that, we come up with a notion that prudential decisions are those that involve regret. Geez, I wish I'd have done that. I could have made a lot more money, those kinds of things. So when you're thinking about regret, you're thinking about prudence. That's the first Olympic ring of ethics, we call it. The second one over on the left, we want to think about legal aspects. And legal aspects have to do with, are there any laws for or against this? We give a lot of attention to the notion that the legal ball or the legal ring is quite distinct from the ethical ring, isn't it? And the way we like to emphasize this is, do you want these types of people, the people who are responsible for laws or mandates, writing your ethical code for you? And most students and most people say, no, I don't want that. I don't want a political process, a lawmaking process writing my ethical code. I want to write my own ethical code. And I want to think about the law at the same time, but distinct from ethics. Okay, when you think about it that way, one of the things we talk a lot about, and we talked about in another course that we've offered here at Stanford is, okay, what part of your ethical code would you be willing to impose on others by force? If your ethical code doesn't include something like child sexual abuse, would you be willing to impose that on others by force? I would. If your ethical code says, I don't imbibe alcohol, would you be willing to impose that on others by force? I wouldn't. So we like to think a lot about the legal as part of an ethical code that's imposed on others by force. That's not what we really want to talk about completely when we talk about ethics. Once we've thought through the prudential and legal aspects of these decisions, the last one is ethics. And ethics boils down to right and wrong, acceptable and unacceptable. And when we're thinking about ethical decisions, we're thinking about remorse. We're thinking about lying awake nights, wishing perhaps that we had not done that or we had done that. So remorse is associated with ethics. Regret is associated with prudence. So let's go back and think about how I thought about the testifying in behalf of tobacco companies on secondhand smoke. Prudentiality, was that prudential? Yeah, I could have made a heck of a lot of money doing that. I could have gotten a lot of notoriety and so forth. So from a prudential aspect, had I taken that assignment and done that, it would have been very much in my personal economic interest. Legal, any legal implications of that decision? Probably not unless there was some perjury involved. Okay, ethical, right and wrong. Would it have been ethical? Would it have been right for me to lend my support to that kind of a thing? Would you have done it? I didn't do it. I turned it down. When I look back on that, is there regret? Well, there's regret when I think about the pecuniary rewards that I might have gotten, but there's no remorse. I know I did the right thing. And these kinds of ethical decisions are with us every day, aren't they? A little bit of background on me. My father was the general manager of a large open pit copper mine in the state of Nevada, a place called Weed Heights, Nevada. You'll note the arrow on the diagram that will become significant in a few minutes, okay? That large open pit copper mine has been closed for roughly 3 decades. It's now a Superfund site. It pollutes groundwater. The gravel and other stuff blows around in the wind and gets around that valley. Kind of an interesting question is, did my dad and his colleagues do anything unethical engaging in the mining business? Well, was it prudential? Yes. Was it legal? Yes. Was it the right thing to do? Did they know that they were going to pollute? Did they know that they were going to harm the environment? They did not know that. The state of information that they had in those days was very low on groundwater, on migration of surficial water and so forth. I would argue there was nothing unethical given the state of information that they had. Would it be unethical to behave that way today? It might well be, because we know more. So ethics is rational as well. I do want, and this is kind of a funny story, using a Will Rogers quote. When I moved from Nevada to California, here at Stanford, I lowered the average IQ of both places. When I finished at Stanford, the first job that I got, and this is in the public domain, so I'm not divulging any confidences, was at the Environmental Protection Agency. And there was a pesticide named DDT, many of you had known about that, which was canceled a couple of years prior to this. The next one in line was a pesticide called Chlordane, which is very effective against termites and cornworms and so forth. The motivation for canceling it was it may be carcinogenic and it may have long-term harm in the environment. So would you have taken this job? I was not ethically sensitive in those days. It was my first job. I did take it. And I have no expertise in the human biology or the environmental biology. My job was to figure out how much economic dislocation would happen if the pesticide was canceled. So I don't think I did anything unethical. Now, the next point to be made over and over again, and in our everyday ethics and in our course, we really worry about this, and that is ethics extends well beyond business, doesn't it? We very much consider that. Let's think of another ethical question. Would you cheat on your spouse or your significant other? Would you do that? Would you hook up at a bar or at work? What if you were committed to a significant other? Would that make a difference? What if you were a free electron, uncommitted? And the ethical codes that our students write here, they focus on this. Some would, some wouldn't. Ethics is personal. It has to do with decisions. You remember the arrow in the mine. I grew up in the state of Nevada where prostitution was legal. Okay? And the question that comes, it's an ethical question, is would you go to a brothel or equivalent? Would you do that? The county that I grew up in, Lyon County, Nevada, still has prostitution legal. And if you look at that arrow, about 7 miles up there was a legal brothel. The famous Mustang Ranch was pretty close. It was maybe 40 miles up that road. One of the things we noticed is those places always had cars in the parking lot, and my dad used to complain. They were my employees' cars. Would you do that? It's a question for your ethical code, isn't it? And when we think about that, we offer 3 other distinctions that we need to think about in considering and pondering and analyzing the ethics of a decision we might make. The first dimension is lying, deception. When we think about going to a brothel or we think about despoiling the environment, are we lying? Are we lying to others? Are we lying to ourselves? So lying, understanding deception and lying is a big part of understanding ethics. Stealing, violating property is the second aspect. Are we doing something to violate the property of others? Are we taking it? And the third aspect of ethics, we know this one, harming, violating the person of someone else. Most ethical decisions and most dimensions of those can be categorized in lying and deception, stealing and harming. And we give a good deal of attention in our analysis to these things. If you're kind of free on each of these dimensions, there's a good chance that you're making an ethically respectable decision. Okay? This raises another point, and that is that morals are quite different from ethics, aren't they? What are morals? What's the definition of more? It's what's acceptable in your society. In my society as a child, a lot of guys would go to these brothels. They still do. It was consistent of the mores of that society. You weren't rejected for doing that on a social basis. But is it ethical? Would you do it? That's the important question. Turn to another couple of business scenarios that I've personally been involved in. One was a natural gas research organization. What they were doing was levying a tax against ratepayers. My company was approached. Hey, you got a great bunch of models and analysis here. Certainly you can come in here and help us convince the regulator to tax ratepayers at an even higher level so we can do even more R&D. And you can tell everybody how beneficial that is. Would you do that for us, please? Would you come in and get us more money? Would you have done that job? We didn't do that job. Here's one that we did. Climate change. National Energy Technology Laboratory, it's a government body. This is in the public domain. We need some electricity modeling to show that global warming from Ohio coal generation is deleterious to the environment over the long term. We got a lot of money for that. We'll make it worth your while. Would you do it? So let's talk about prudential. Is it prudential? Sure. You can make some money doing this. Is it legal? Sure. Is it ethical? I didn't have an ethical problem with it. And that kind of simple analysis. Was I lying? No. Was I stealing? No. Was I harming? No. Here's one that's a little more murky. And this one occurred some years ago. I had sold a company to a very large service firm. I became an employee for a specified minimum period of time. And when I joined, like most people, I was required to sign an ethics and conflict of interest professional practice agreement. I did. And there was a meeting of the minds on those agreements. In ethics, we talk a lot about meeting of the minds. What do you expect me to do and what am I going to do? I knew what they meant and I agreed with what they meant. I think doing those kinds of things is not ethical, probably not legal as well. One of the provisions in those agreements, as in most that I've seen, was that I was not to engage in bribery, gifts, considerations, kickbacks, commissions, conflict of interest, and certainly no blackmail or extortion. And as you think about what we teach in the ethical analyst, and you think about these agreements, you're much better prepared to understand these agreements and what they mean legally and ethically. It wasn't long after I joined that I was summoned to a conference call, and there were quite a few partners on that call. The company had been initiating a very large proposal effort to a company. The person responsible at that company was somebody that I knew. And I had worked with her. She was a VP in that company in a previous job in a previous company. The conference call went something like this. Nesbitt, you know their VP, Betsy? That's not her real name. I do. I worked for her as a consultant a couple of years back. Did she like you? I never really asked, but I inferred so. Let's cut to the chase. We want this job, and it's competitive. We want you, Dale, to get Betsy and her husband up to La Cantera, not really the name of the place that we went to. It's a PGA golf course and a resort, for a fully paid, luxurious, relaxing weekend away from the kids, fully paid by us. By the way, is she happy with her husband? I was asked. We need to invite her up for a brief business meeting on Friday, and then we'll give her a luxurious weekend with her husband because we want her to be positively disposed towards our proposal. What we'd like you to do, Dale, is we'd like you to approach her. You know her. None of us knows her. And we'd like you to propose this. Would you have done this? Would your ethical code have allowed you to do this? Would that legal agreement that you signed with this company have allowed you to do this? Well, I said I can't do it. I agreed not to do this kind of thing. And there were a couple of people that were pretty furious, telling me I was letting the company down. We need this money to pay the salaries of our people. It's a big contract. There's no I in team. You've got to be a team player. You've got to do this. And I replied as an ethical analyst and said, suppose they'd asked me to rob a liquor store. Would I do that? Would you expect me to do that? They said, well, of course not. And I said, well, you're asking me to break a contract that I have with you and to violate my ethical code. The answer is no. Ethics is fairly easy when you think about it that way, isn't it? Would it have been prudential for me to do it? I don't know. Would it have been legal for me to do it? Not clear. Not clear. Maybe not. Would it have been ethical for me to do it? No. Isn't a sales commission the same thing? Those of you who work under commission, you'll do a lot of things to get a sale. Will you do anything unethical? We'll talk about that in a minute. And the minute is right now. Not long thereafter, we submitted a proposal to the North Dakota Highway Department. We won't talk about what it is, but it had to do with managing their infrastructure and so forth. We worked and worked and worked and submitted what I considered to be an honest and attractive proposal at a budget of $1.5 million. The amount's fictitious, but the point is made. On the day of the award, I phoned them up and I asked, how did you like our proposal? They said, we loved it. It was the best proposal by far. We want to do business with you guys. It's head and shoulders above the other proposals that we got. There were 5 others. However, you're 5 times the budget of them. Aren't you smart enough to know that what you do is you bid way below your cost if you ever want to get in the door here? And then you look for ways to augment the budget. You can't tell the truth in these bids. What you have to do is reduce your cost to the point where your cost competitive and then look for change orders. So give you one chance here, and if you can do it, I'm not even sure. If you can reduce your bid by 80%, we'll reconsider you. You'll be out of the competitive range. Would you do that? Would you write a proposal to do something that you know you can't do? I didn't. I said, I can't do that. It's just not okay to do that. Is it legal? Yeah. Is it prudential? Yeah. Is it ethical? Is it right? No, it's not. I'm representing in writing that I can do something that I know I can't do for the budget that they have. There's a really interesting structure out there called the Eastern Span of the San Francisco Bay Bridge. It was bid on exactly that kind of basis. The original contractor bid $1 billion on it. It came in at over $6 billion, and it was all change orders. I would argue, and in the public press, people knew they could never do it for the bid that they offered, but they offered those bids and looked for the change orders. Is that ethical? Is that something that you would do? Another personal vignette from my own practice was an international resource company. And it wasn't an oil company, but it was a company like an oil company. I'll call them as a pseudonym Riverbend Company. This is very insightful. They're one of the larger international resources producers in the world. They're headquartered out of the US. We had a fixed price contract with this organization. True amounts are disguised. Everything was agreed to. We had a meeting of the minds. We knew what we were going to do. They knew what we were going to do. Now, the client, who was not really named Bob, but we'll use that pseudonym, all along the way kept asking for more. Hey, the boss wants to understand CO2 better. Let's get it in there and understand it. Let's run 10 more scenarios. Let's get the client point of view in there. The boss really wants to understand CO2 remediation. All good objectives, right? And so we said, that's good. We're glad to expand the scope to take care of it. And Bob kept assuring us, don't worry, you'll get paid. No sweat. Just get going. Just get going. I'll take care of the contract and payment. I'll have it to you next week. We can't wait. Just go. We must have had that conversation 5 or more times with me getting nervous that we didn't have a contract for this performance. It was unequivocal assurance. We came to the end. The client called and said, the proverbial good news, bad news preamble. Fantastic job. Our CEO, JB, loved it. However, I'm sorry, I didn't budget or enable the initial work all along the way, even though I told you I would. Can't do it now. There are realities. My management won't accept it. They aren't expecting them. I can't do it. You're going to have to accept the original budget as payment in full. You're going to have to forego the 50% additional budget that I told you that I would get you, and I didn't. But Dale, we were happy. I know that I verbally authorized this, and I know you did it and delivered it. I know you really should get that additional money because we agreed. Alas, I just can't come through. This is final. Take it or leave it. What I said was, this isn't acceptable. You gave me your word. You told me that you were going to pay me. I know I gave you my word, but I didn't, I can't, I won't. You deserve it. I'm not going to do it. Then it got really tough. He said, if you send me an invoice for the original amount, I'll get it paid. If you invoice me for a dime more, I'll say there's no contract, and it'll drag out over a major hassle. It might be a month or 2 months, maybe a year before you ever get paid anything. I said, you lied to me. He said, take it or leave it. That's final. I said, I'll accept it. I don't have a choice. I've already paid my people and I need to cover. And he goes, sorry, I let you down. I didn't get the paperwork done because management was complaining about the cost of this project. And I wasn't going to raise my hand and ask for more money. I'm sure you understand. No, Bob, I don't. So here's the funny part. I sent an invoice for $150K as I agreed. I got a check 2 weeks later for $150K on Monday. On Wednesday, I got a second check for $150K. By accident, they had made an accounting error and they paid me twice. So I had in my hands more than we had agreed to, including the authorized budget in the middle. I had his life in my hands tonight. In my shoes, what would you have done? What would you have done? Prudentially, what would you have done? You'd have kept the money. Legally, probably okay. Ethically, what would you have done? The analysis I did was, I called him up and said, hey man, thanks for the $75,000 tip. That was great. What? You paid me twice. I didn't know you liked the work so much. Out comes the ethical confession of sins. Oh my God, there goes my job. I'm going to get fired. You're going to keep the money and blow my budget. I know you'll do that. I might be forced out of the company over this. I never told management a word about it. I expanded scope on you knowing that we wouldn't pay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He confessed sin after sin, lie after lie after lie. One of the things we talk about a lot in the ethical analyst is if you grab one paper clip, the whole stack comes. Just like lies. You tell one lie, the whole set of lies follows, doesn't it? What did I do? And I had a lot of arguments with my colleagues. The key was my words, I'll accept it. I didn't say I might accept it. I said I'll accept it. I have no choice. I've already paid my people. I need to cover it as I won't be paid. So I said, I'm not dishonest. I told you I'd accept $150K, even under duress. I dropped that second check uncashed in the mail back to you this morning. I won't be paid for doing your project, and your dishonesty is responsible for that. He said, I can't believe you did that. Boy, there's a key comment. I said, yeah, I know, Bob, you would have kept the money. I know you would have. This is the first time you've actually told me the truth on the project. It brings up another point we talk about in ethics. Is your word your bond? In my ethical code, which I don't share, my word is my bond. And in the student ethical codes that we write in class, they're very personal. They're all kept in strict confidence. Nobody sees anybody's ethical code, and you'll see why. Okay, did I do the right thing? Here's a famous one, and this is Harry Truman at the end of World War II. We talk a lot about consequentialism in ethics, but here was one where there had been a very bloody war that had been going on for 4 years. Estimates of deaths in World War II were 77.5 million people around the world died. Harry Truman said, it'll be 500,000 to 1 million people will die if we have to invade the Japanese mainland. If we drop the atomic bombs, those people won't die. Okay? People in Japan are dying anyway under the fire bombings that we're doing. And so he said, let's do a benefit cost analysis of this. And the benefit cost analysis was very simple. We save 500,000 to 1 million lives. Okay. And we saved the fire bombings on their side. So dropping the atomic bombs that the United States ended up dropping was actually a net positive. And that's a consequentialist ethical argument. And consequences means you do a benefit cost analysis of lying or harming or anything else. And if the benefits exceed the cost, it's ethically respectable to do it. That was the analysis that was made. I would suggest, if you're interested in this, read Richard Rhodes' The Making of the Atomic Bomb. We teach a lot about consequentialist ethics, and we teach a lot about action-based ethics. And that was a classic example that we try to analyze and think through. One of the other things that we know is that if we accept public office or run for public office, we will be consequentialist in our decision making. We will have to assess aggregate benefits and cost. And for things like dropping an atomic bomb, maybe we don't want to do that. Maybe we want to say, we don't drop it under any circumstance, no matter what the consequences. Okay, go past that. Here's another ethical issue we're seeing all the time in the United States. Would you own a handgun? Is it ethical to own one? Is it ethical to carry? Would you apply for a permit? And if you got it, would you carry it? This brings up a point in ethics that imposing harm or on a person or property is clearly unethical. But what about imposing risk? This imposes a lot of risk on people. And imposing a risk has ethical consequences too, doesn't it? Serious ethical consequences. We think that imposing risk on people is unethical. Would you own a male pit bull unspayed and put the male pit bull in your backyard? That's imposing risk on people, many people think too. Would you do it? And notice in the commentary we have here, I keep saying, would you do it? Would you make that decision? And that's the centerpiece of ethics, isn't it? It's what do you do? Or what do you not do? The other thing we focus on a lot, and we see it everywhere, are white lies. I find it difficult to discern lies by color, but white lies are the harmless lies that are told to save the feelings of another person. The classical white lie is, honey, do I look fat in these pants? What are you supposed to say from an ethical perspective? Are you supposed to say, no, you look really slim, you look ravishing? Are you supposed to say, I love you anyway, no matter what your weight is? And one of the things that we note is that there is ethical content in your answer. If you're willing to lie about the small things, are you willing to lie about the large things? Very interesting. White lies may not be as innocuous as you think. Romantic involvement in the workplace is another issue that we see time and time again, isn't it? We see it a lot. And back in the old days, maybe 10 years ago, there were no corporate rules against it. Now there are. Does that matter? Does it matter whether there are rules against it or not in your ethical code? The rules are kind of a legal thing, right? It may be illegal to have this, certainly against the rules, or you've signed a contract not to do it. But suppose you didn't have that. Is it okay? I'll give you one other example from my practice. This has happened in everybody's practice. I was working with a client organization with a team of about 4 of them and about 4 of us. And one of the client's persons was a lady named Anne, junior professional in their organization, single, attractive, very forward in her behavior. She became very flirtatious with one of our senior guys. Okay. And particularly at the dinner and drinks events that you invariably have after work, they left arm in arm from one of those events and didn't resurface till the next morning. Now, Gary, our guy, was married with kids. She wasn't. Was her behavior ethical? It was legal. Was it prudential? Only she would know, right? Was it ethical? Was his behavior ethical? Here's the other one. Was my behavior ethical? I didn't tell anybody about it. Now, I know that in modern companies, you have you got to tell about these kind of things inside your company. Would you tell your senior management that Gary had breached his contract? Interesting ethical questions, aren't they? It's one of my favorites because I've been so tempted so many times. How many times have you been at a hotel and you walk by a table and that's what you see? And you look over there and this is a conference for hairdressing and makeup. So it's not your conference. You have no idea who these people are. Is it okay to say, you know, they're not going to miss a couple of shrimp and a cup of coffee and some nice condiments, are they? I'll just go over and help myself. The marginal cost is zero to them, right? That's the rationale. Is it okay to do that? More generally, if somebody else doesn't need something, is it okay for you to take it? That's a really penetrating ethical question. It's a question of our day, isn't it? So do you belly up and take it? I don't. I wouldn't be able to sleep nights. It's not my property. I don't do things like that, but I see people bellying up all the time. Okay. I'm gonna skip by this one. This would be, how are we doing on time? We're pretty close to the end. Okay, this will be the last one. Many of you have read about Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. And she was the one who, Theranos was the one who said, we only need a tiny drop of blood. And those of you who have needle phobia, just give a little finger prick. And we can do everything with that tiny drop of blood that we could have done with the large vial of blood that we normally withdraw from your arm and send through a standard laboratory. And there was a number of allegations of fraudulent behavior and so forth like that, and which we'll get into in just 1 minute. Ultimately, she and her CEO were alleged to have committed fraud with regard to the directors and to the investors in their company, because what they had been doing was taking a standard sized vial of blood from people, and rather than putting it through their own technology that didn't work, they allegedly sent it out to standard laboratories and then reported it back. And this gets into a word that we hear all the time. Is called spin. What does spin mean? It means lie. One of the things we talk a lot about in the ethical analyst, in our analysis of ethics, is let's don't let euphemisms think for us. Euphemisms like lie, like racial epithets, things like that, these are all lies. You can't be meaning that because the meaning is so broad. Spin, what is spin? Reading from a paper article on January 29th, footage from company parties and internal interviews made the whole thing come alive and helps paint a full picture of what was happening inside this now infamously secretive shop. This is the sentence that really got me. I think one of Elizabeth's greatest skills, at least in terms of Theranos initiative, is her ability as a storyteller. A storyteller. What's a storyteller? It's a liar, right? It's a story. This is a euphemism, okay? She was able to be so convincing because she convinced herself. She convinced herself that the righteousness of her cause was so great that if they cut a few corners here and there or did a few bad tests, that they'd get it right ultimately and save lives. That idea that the ends justify the means isn't particularly well time-tested, is it? The interesting question is, would you hire her? Would you hire? Was it prudential for her to do this? Turns out it wasn't. Was it legal? Turns out it wasn't. But was it ethical? Is it ethical to say, well, we'll get it right next time. We'll represent the final objective that we're looking for, rather than the realities along the way. So when we think about ethics, we really want to think in summary. I'll flip to the summary and then we can talk. Oh, this was another one. Just talk very briefly. My company developed the original seat pricing algorithm for United Airlines and others. It's well known. It's a very interesting ethical question that comes out of that. What we helped that airline do was charge different prices to different people for the exact same thing. A seat on an airplane from LA to New York. Is that ethical? Is it ethical to charge different people dramatically different prices for the exact same thing? It happens all the time. Okay, let's conclude then with some of the final thoughts that we have, and then we'll open up the questions. Ethical codes and ethics, the way I see it, have to be actionable. You actually have to be able to do something or not do something based on your ethical code. So abstract, theoretical, hypothetical, non-actionable consequences don't really cut the mustard. My ethical code doesn't have cure world hunger in it. How can they ever do that? It'd be a nice ethical thing to do, but it's not actionable. The other thing is ethics is not coercible. You can't force somebody to be ethical. Ethics relates to the decisions that you make when no one's watching you, when no one's coercing you. It's what you do when you turn out the lights and really make that decision. And the point of ethics is not to bash others on their ethical behavior. That's not what it's about. It's about to formulate what's ethical and what's not, what's right and wrong and what's not, which decisions are justifiable. One of the other things that we've perceived as decision analysts is that ethics may well be rational and self-interested. A lot of people say, well, if you're ethical, you're like lambs to the slaughter. You're exposing your soft underside to unethical behavior by others. I'm not so sure that's an empirically valid assessment. Quite the contrary. Ethical behavior tends to be, I think, rewarded by ethical behavior. The famous book by Robert Axelrod from the 80s called The Evolution of Cooperation talks about reinforced positive behavior induces counterparties to behave that way. The ethical analyst is replete with these kinds of ethical situations. We don't talk politics, that gets in the way. We don't talk labels, we don't label. If people talk labels in the class, we eliminate the labels. It's not about promoting a specific brand of ethics, consequentialism, action-based ethics, virtue ethics, etc. We do present a broad range of historical thought on ethics, but it's about raising ethical sensitivities and providing tools for making the right decisions, ethical decisions. For those of you who won't be taking the course, I would strongly recommend you grab the book that was written for this course about 10 years ago by retired Professor Ronald Howard and Clint Corver, Ethics for the Real World. It's available on Amazon for about 20 bucks Kindle, 30 bucks hard. We use it in the course. The last point, and thank you very much for your attendance at the webinar. Ethics professors complain all the time, ubiquitously. No one ever actually does this. They love the course, but they never do it. And what we've found is that there's a much higher possibility of people behaving ethically when they write an ethical code. Why is that? It's like practicing the piano. You figure out what you need to do. What are the exercises you need to do? You make a commitment to do that. That's what an ethical code is. It's getting the principles together, getting a good understanding of them. So when the ethical situations occur, the speed of occurrence doesn't get in the way of just saying, oh, the heck with ethics, I'm just going to do what's prudential.
So, you mentioned about the tools for ethical decision-making, and I know here and elsewhere you've talked about disciplined decision-making that happens around ethics. It sounds like the first step is writing that ethical code. What are some other ways to achieve that discipline, and what are some of the barriers to acting ethically? So just to bring up a few examples, you mentioned, for instance, the money, and you got the extra $150,000 to return that money. For some people, maybe they would need that money. They couldn't afford to not be paid, and maybe you couldn't afford to not be paid. So that seems to be a huge barrier, potentially, when you're choosing between acting ethically by returning the money, your word is your bond, and perhaps acting ethically by supporting your family. Another example that a few people brought up was, how do you influence change or influence the ethical direction of an organization or another individual when you're lower on the food chain in a company? So again, broadly speaking, what are some tools for being disciplined in your decision-making, living by that ethical code? And maybe more specifically, what are some of the common barriers that you help students anticipate and think about ways to overcome?
Those are good questions, and there's several of them. Let me start by how do I make ethical decisions better? And I go back to, say, a concert pianist. What do? What they do is they understand the principles that they have to perform by. That's step one. And step two is they commit to using those principles perfectly, personally, not perfectly, personally. Then number three, they practice and practice, and they write it down in a code. Okay. One of the best ways to behave ethically on an individual basis is to not sidestep 1 and 2. Understand the principles that drive your personal ethical code and rehearse those principles. So when these decisions come to you, you can make these decisions. The question we always get is, that's great. You know, I'm 5 years into my career. I'm a junior professional in my organization. I can't do anything. Yes, you can. You can either refuse or, in the extreme, agree to participate in certain things. But you can help people understand that, you know, this kind of a thing, say concealing an environmental transgression, this has consequences, okay? If people find out, it's going to be a lot worse for you. Don't lie about it. And yeah, the law department doesn't want you to lie. One of the biggest impediments to ethical behavior is the reward and penalty system. You're rewarded prudentially for going along and getting along, and you can be penalized pretty prudentially for not going along and getting along. I think one of the main things that you can help people understand is the intersection, if there is one, between the ethical ring and the prudential ring. We all in our careers, we're looking for promotions, we're looking for good reviews and so forth. And we really need to think if we're willing to engage in unethical behavior to get there, like claiming credit for the work of other people, that kind of thing. So really carefully think through, just as a classical piano player would do, what are your principles? How do they pertain to you? And then how do you communicate those to other people?
So it sounds like in the class itself, a lot of these ethical dilemmas, the purpose is not necessarily to reach a consensus in the class,
Absolutely.
but use them as an opportunity to sort of reflect on your own reactions and thoughts about those as you formulate that ethical
Absolutely.
code.
The ethical codes that I've seen in the last decade are pretty diverse and disparate on a number of these issues that we talked about. Some people are pretty self-focused. They feel they're good people, and they don't really need an ethical code, just says, you know, I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to steal, and that's it. Other people are very reflective. They worry about gender ethics. They worry about end-of-life ethics. They worry about convincing other people in their companies that to do A, B, and C would lack ethical value. So you'll see big differences in these codes. What we want people to do is think through the principles that are going to guide their ethical code and then to codify it. It's the best way to increase the number of decisions that you make ethically.
So the codes are intensely personal, it sounds like. I mean,
really personal.
So when you've encountered these kinds of ethical dilemmas in a team environment, and there's a different ethical perspective, I mean, what is your responsibility? I mean, I suppose it's written into the code itself, but how do you resolve those kinds of ethical conflicts between personal ethical codes?
A couple of times, most of the time when you're in a team and you're in disagreement about what's ethical or not ethical, the most important thing to think about is, do I disagree on the information or do I disagree on the values? In decision analysis, we teach that decisions are comprised of three things: alternatives, information, and values. Many times in a team, like if we're arguing about, say, climate change, we're not disagreeing on the values. What we're disagreeing on is the information. Let's make sure that we understand where we may be disagreeing on information and clarify that. And quite often you'll find that on these teams, you're not really disagreeing on the values at all. You're just agreeing on the alternatives to get there. There's huge progress that can be made when you're able to pick apart the three bases for decision making and collectively think that through.
Interesting. Okay, so in terms of the organizational barriers to, I guess, ethical decision making, I mean, so there's it sounds like often teams don't have often it's not an ethical disagreement, it's one about information.
Yeah.
are there other organizational barriers that are built in? Or I guess another way to ask that question,
Yes.
and we talked about beforehand, is if you had a magic wand, you could change one thing about organizations in the world or the US, nonprofit, for-profit government. What would you change about them in order to increase ethical behavior in those?
Let me answer. There's two questions there. The first one is, what is the biggest impediment? What I see in United States and Europe and Asia, where I've practiced, the legal issues are so expensive and difficult and create such a penalty structure that law firms almost manage companies anymore. And that's an impediment to ethical behavior. You're told not to say things. You're told not to do certain things by your law firm. And we've got to be, because you don't want to plead guilty to some sort of an infraction de facto. So that's a difficult one to get around.
So you're saying just as the way prudential and ethical decisions can come in conflict, so can the legal and ethical as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you thought you were going to be sued for something, your law firm will tell you, don't disclose that, and do A, B, and C, don't do E, and F. That's very difficult. The second question was, I've forgotten, please.
If you had a magic wand, so what would be the one thing you would change about institutions? Yes.
Okay, everybody personally, the biggest thing they take away from our course, even if they just sit into a lecture like this, don't lie. Don't lie.
Okay.
Don't lie. It's real easy. No white lies, no green lies, no yellow lies, no black lies, no red lies. Don't lie. And sometime just go through your day and think how many times you lied. And for me personally, I was pretty, we'll use a euphemism, fast and loose with the truth sometimes. That's not okay. If you learn one thing from this course, it's do not lie.
So it's almost keeping maybe a journal or log through a couple days, just doing a personal accounting of,
My ethical code doesn't have that in there, but I do. And even white lies, even small lies, taking credit for others' work, sitting quietly when you're given credit for someone else's work. Don't do that. Correct the lie.
Well, we're almost out of time, and so I want to just come back to the course, but a couple people asked you to name the book again, so I'm going to jump back to sort of a couple people asked about this, and I guess as a follow-up, if there's one thing, so don't lie, but if there's one other thing you would recommend for everyone to do, even if they can't take the course, what would be that one thing that you would think they should do?
Help people think through the discrimination, the 3 Olympic rings, on the decisions you're about to enter, the prudential, the ethical, and the legal. And what we do quite often, we've all done this, is we say, well, it's so prudential. This is such a good deal for me. Forget that little ring on the lower right. We'll just do it. The reward and penalty structure can get in the way of good ethical decision-making, short term.
Thank you, everyone, for your time. I'm sorry if we didn't get to all the questions. They were excellent. And hopefully everyone will continue to engage with these issues. So thank you again.